Hello, everybody, and welcome to my new review series for Season 1 of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Yes, my plan is to cover and review all 39 Season 1 episodes. I've seen these episodes before, but some of them I have not seen in quite a while, and I thought it would be fun to go back and revisit this classic series and go a little bit more in depth on each episode of this very classic and influential series. And we start out pretty strong here with Season 1, Episode 1, titled Revenge. Now, this episode was directed by Alfred Hitchcock himself. I guess if you're going to make a premiere and call the show Alfred Hitchcock Presents, this makes sense. And it stars Ralph Meeker as Carl Span and Vera Miles as Elsa Span. And I have to say that this episode might seem a little tame by TV standards of today, as television has changed a lot in content over the years, but for the mid-50s when this show aired, I would actually consider this episode to be pretty bold in a lot of ways, and for the most part it holds up with just a few small issues. It is definitely a strong beginning for the show. So we start with a great opening theme, very classic and iconic theme music, and then we get an introduction by Alfred Hitchcock, which kind of just introduces the episode, and there will be one of these before every episode, and they're pretty amusing. Most of them hold up pretty well, I think. So then we get into the story itself, and we start with Carl and Elsa, our main characters, and they seem like a happy couple. And Carl is going to have to go to work, we find out. He's a little bit worried about leaving Elsa, but Elsa talks about how the people there are nice and about how she'll be okay. We also learn at this point that Elsa had some issues, that she's under doctor's orders. We're not sure for what yet. She says she'll just take a walk, she'll sunbathe, all the things that the doctor told her to do, basically. So then we go to the next scene, and Carl's leaving for work, and we're introduced to another character who's somewhat important, named Mrs. Ferguson. And I wish her character would have been fleshed out a little bit more, one of my small complaints. But she says she'll check in with Elsa as the day goes on. As you can tell, Carl's a little bit concerned. So she does. She goes to see Elsa, and the two ladies basically chat for a while, and we learn a lot more about Elsa, which is very important to the end of the story. We learn that she had some type of breakdown. We're not sure how bad it was, and we also learn that she used to be a dancer, which is a very different world from where she is now. And basically, her and her husband moved there to get like a different scenery, change of scenery, something like that. So at this point, after the two ladies chat some more, Elsa basically does go out to sit and relax for a while, and she goes out basically to sunbathe, and Mrs. Ferguson gives her this weird look when she goes out there and gets in her swimsuit. I think it's supposed to show some kind of disapproval on the part of Mrs. Ferguson, but they never go any further than that with it, and it just seemed a little bit strange, but it's interesting. It's interesting for the time period, that's for sure. So later on, Carl comes home and he finds Elsa on the ground, and she's pretty much out of it. It seems like she's conscious, but she's not really saying anything. And then she does talk, and she's saying that someone killed her over and over. Basically, she gives the rest of her story at this point, saying a man came in and said he was a salesman, so she let him in, and basically when he asked for money and she refused, he choked her, he basically attacked her, and she keeps saying he killed her, even though obviously she's still alive, but I think we know what she means by this. But at this point, I have to say that we have to question Elsa a little bit too, because we know her past, and she's being very vague, but it could just be shock from what happened, and we're not really sure, and it's done pretty well for the most part here. We're wondering what's happening as an audience, and the police just question everyone. They question Carl, they question Mrs. Ferguson, things like that, and then we learn from the doctor that he says physically Elsa's okay, which is interesting, but he says mentally he's not sure with everything she had been through, basically her history plus this attack. He's not sure mentally how she is, which makes us question even more what's going on. So we find out then really that the police have very little to go on, not much at all, and you can tell this really bothers Carl. He's not happy about it. And he goes to talk to Elsa, and she's still not doing too well. He's very upset, and he basically says if he ever finds the guy, he'll kill him, and we'll find out later that he means that very literally. So Carl and Elsa are talking again. And, she still seems to be kind of out of it. And Carl decides he's going to go look for the attacker. So he brings Elsa along because she says she would be able to identify him if she saw him again. So they're driving around, and suddenly Elsa says she sees the man. So Carl naturally believes her, I guess naturally, and he gets out of the car and he follows this guy. And I got to say, this guy was pretty non-suspicious. Carl was looking pretty strange here, but the guy thought nothing of it. So eventually Carl gets into the guy's room a little too easily, I might add. Boy, this guy really wasn't worried at all. But he should have been, because Carl basically kind of beats him over the head with some kind of weapon and kills him, I guess. So Carl leaves and drives off, and he thinks he's gotten revenge for his wife. And then as they're driving, Elsa identifies another man. So it's either that Elsa isn't really sure who did this to her because she's so out of it, or maybe she wasn't even hurt as bad as she said, or was she even attacked at all? It's kind of vague and strange, and that part of the episode's a little bit shaky. I guess you could make the argument it's better that we don't really know what happened, but I found this to be okay, but a little unsatisfactory. But overall, I feel like this being done in the mid-50s, this was the best they could do. They couldn't literally really show us more than this because of how things on television were at the time. So it's definitely an episode worth watching, I would say. And in the closing narration, Alfred Hitchcock tells us what happened, that Carl was caught, and that's a little bit unsatisfying too, but again, that's kind of how things were then. But overall, this episode's pretty daring for its time. It's pretty fast-paced and interesting, and it's well acted, and Hitchcock does a nice job with the direction overall. So I'm going to give Revenge a 4 out of 5. Definitely a nice introduction to the show, and if you're interested in Alfred Hitchcock Presents, this would be a nice place to start. So 4 out of 5 for Revenge, and as always, thanks for watching.